What is that? I know, right? And then I made up this story. Like, I forget who I used. This was years ago. Who's that lady that's on The Family? Modern Family? The real nice-looking one? Yeah. So this is what I tell her. I go, yeah, I come home last night, right? And I'm watching TV, and all of a sudden I hear this banging on the door. And I go, it's Sofia Vergara, right? And she's like, Tim, I want you. I'm like, look, I'm tired. I was making futures at Gateway all day, right? Leave me alone. And then she's like crying on the back porch. And my girl's like, you're kidding me. Right. And she's really a bright woman. I mean, she's really bright. But when it comes to like stuff, like emotional stuff, it's like, no, she's really, really, really bright. And I'm like, wow. Like emotional intelligence and intellectual intelligence for women are mutually exclusive. Like, I had this one girl. She was the lab tech here before Nathan, right? And we would sit there and we'd talk about stuff like, I don't know, like politics. I'm like, holy shit, this woman is smart. She's really smart, right? Then she comes in one time and she goes, Tim, do you think it's weird that my boyfriend asked me to buy him makeup?
Yes. Not at all. I get my concealer all the time. We share, Sarah. We love to glue our toes down together.
I gotta tell you. Okay, here we go. Now, look and watch. And I'm going to say this because I know it's true. I have been good to you guys, yes? Okay, now watch. The respiratory and kidney quiz, the gloves come off. You got me? I'm not taking any prisoners. You're going to study this and you're going to learn. You got me? Say yeah. Okay. One. No, I've been good to you guys. Haven't I? All right. Now shut up and listen. No, what teacher said that? I know. I don't like me either. And when I'm sick, I hate me even more. Okay, here we go. Ready? Kidneys. I'm going to go over and list the function of the kidneys. You got me? All right, watch. Number one, the most important of the functions of the kidney is to maintain long-term pH. And I'm going to explain that when we get into the nephron. This is very important. And you will see this when you get into clinical, if you work in the ICU, especially in the ICU. When people are going bad, right, they're going into shock, doctors will temporarily put people on dialysis because they know that with the dialysis, it can maintain their fluid and electrolyte levels and their pH. So when the person starts coming around, they're going to survive. And maintaining blood flow to the kidney is critical. That's why when people's blood pressure is really, really low, they're put on a drug called dopamine. Dopamine increases blood flow to the kidney to maintain kidney function. It's used, that's the basic reason why it's used. So dopamine is a neurotransmitter, but it will increase renal perfusion. So the reason that low-dose dopamine is used is to maintain blood flow to the kidney, and it's critical. So it maintains long-term pH. I'll talk more about that in a little bit. The other thing it does is it maintains long-term blood pressure, and it maintains it through basically two mechanisms, right? Two big mechanisms. One we know about, and that's the pressure diuresis, right? We learned about that. So if you drink something, you got to pee in a little bit. The other one, which we talked a little bit about, but we're going to go into a little more detail, is the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone system. Those two mechanisms maintain your long-term blood pressure. And again, this is really important to remember that anytime an organ fails, all the functions of that organ fail, all of them. So one of the things that will happen when people go into renal failure is their blood pressure will start going up. And now watch, if the kidneys maintain fluid and electrolyte balance, can people who are in renal failure have as much water as they want to drink? No. So they're on fluid restriction, right? The other thing that they do is they filter metabolic waste, and I'm going to go over this in about 2 seconds because we had it with metabolism, right? So watch. The byproducts of glucose and fat, please get this right. What are they? Quickly. That's right. The hydrogen ions, I can't even write it, right? So what system controls CO2? So fat and glucose, the waste product that it produces, the big one, is CO2, and that's controlled by the respiratory system. But protein, amino acids are different, right? So the amino acids, they're used for fuel, or they have to be gotten rid of by the body. We don't store a lot of amino acids in the liver, right? So excess amino acids are either converted to glucose or fat. So what you have to do in the liver is you have to hack off that amino group. And that amino group gets converted to what? Ammonia. And then the ammonia gets converted to urea. And you can't breathe out urea. So you have to get it filtered, out of your blood. And what filters your blood? Your kidneys. So these waste products of ammonia and urea are called combined blood urea nitrogen. And blood urea nitrogen goes up or down based on how much protein you take in. So if you eat a lot of protein, you're going to increase the amount of blood urea nitrogen in your blood. So if you are in kidney failure, do you want a person to be eating a lot of protein? So that's why they're on a low protein diet. Say yes. You got that. Okay. Now, the other one we talked about in skeletal muscle, we store ATP, but not as ATP. We store it as what? How do you store ATP in skeletal muscle? How do you store ATP? Yeah. In skeletal. You store it as creatine phosphate. You got me? And when creatine is metabolized in skeletal muscle, it's metabolized to the waste product, creatinine. And then creatinine gets into the blood, and you have to filter it out of your blood. So the two waste products that the kidneys have to get rid of are blood urea nitrogen and creatinine. You got me? Now look, because your muscle mass doesn't change overnight, the amount of creatinine that you produce on a daily basis is going to be relatively constant. So that is why creatinine is considered the gold standard for measuring kidney function. Nobody likes that one.
What was the other one?
And blood urea nitrogen. So what physicians will do to determine whether the kidneys are actually functioning well is they will do what's called a 24-hour creatinine clearance. They will actually measure the patient's, collect the patient's urine for 24 hours, and they will actually measure the amount of creatinine in there. And then based on the person's total body surface area, they can determine whether or not the kidneys are functioning properly. Tell me you got that. So as the creatinine levels start creeping up, that's an indicator that the kidneys are beginning to fail. And usually you have to have creatinine levels. Normal creatinine level is 0.9 to like 1.8. Some labs use 2 milligrams per deciliter. When that starts getting up around 4, physicians will start looking at the need to put people on dialysis. All right? And just so you know, trauma, like blunt force trauma to muscles where you've damaged muscle, that can cause more creatinine to be dumped into the blood. So trauma can actually lead to kidney failure, right, where the kidney gets overwhelmed. Like massive blunt force trauma to the body, especially the muscle mass, can release that creatinine. Yes. Now, the other thing is, and this is important, is the kidneys are extremely metabolically active. They require a ton of ATP. And what is the best way to make ATP? That's right. So you require oxygen. So one of the other functions of the kidney is to monitor the oxygen saturation of red blood cells. And if the kidney senses hypoxia, the kidneys will release into the blood that hormone called erythropoietin. And erythropoietin then stimulates the bone marrow to make more red blood cells. Here, I'll write it out for you, because I can spell that word.
So another function that kidneys use to monitor
Oxygen saturation and release the hormone erythropoietin. And erythropoietin stimulates the bone marrow to make more red blood cells. So when people are in renal failure, right, all the functions of the kidney fail. So what won't they be able to release? So what will happen to their red blood cell count? So a lot of people in renal failure are anemic, and they require occasional blood transfusion. It stimulates the bone marrow to make red blood cells. So that was the hormone that, what's-his-nose was using? Lance Armstrong? Yeah. The problem with that is that when you have a normal red blood cell count and then you inject yourself with erythropoietin to make more, your blood becomes very viscous. And a lot of these top athletes, they were actually stroking out or having heart attacks because of the increased amount of red blood cells. He was taking other hormones, too, that increase cell division, and that's why they believe he developed cancer, too. Say, yeah, you got that. Okay. So, right. Now, the other thing the kidney does, and we're well aware of this, is that it maintains electrolyte levels. And I'll talk more about that when we get to the nephron, right? The other thing that the kidney does is it activates vitamin D. What's vitamin D needed for? What do you need vitamin D for? Right, what does vitamin D do? Yeah, but what does it do? I'll tell you. It absorbs calcium from the gut. Without vitamin D, you can't absorb calcium from your gut. And you will get one of two things. You will get osteoporosis or rickets if you're young. So kids who lack vitamin D in their diet, they get rickets. So they have like rubbery legs. Do you want rickets? No, you want to go to Gateway. And not get rickets. I know, right? Get a Gateway, get a degree at Gateway, and avoid rickets. That would be a drawing card. Okay. I think I did them all. Those are the functions of the kidney. Oh, look at this, man. Okay, did I play this game with you? Guess where the little dial's going to go? Did I play that with you? Well, are you going to guess? Okay, it's going to, no, right here. Oh, I'm going to restart it. Did I tell you I'm going to get all new equipment next semester? Yeah. Yeah. the dean of the campus made it especially known to me that you're getting it next semester, so the people this semester are not going to be able to experience it. And I got a good call, dude. Good call. All right, what the hell? Okay, tell me you followed that.
Yeah.
You're with me. Okay. All right. Watch. We have a big, hefty bag that holds all our abdominal organs, right? What's it called? Right. It's called the visceral peritoneum. You got me? Then you have the parietal peritoneum that lines the body cavity. This is very important. The kidneys are retroperitoneal. They are outside of the peritoneal membrane. And the peritoneal membrane is one of the best dialyzing membranes you have. So because the kidneys are outside of the peritoneal membrane, so if you look here, a real stupid, sick drawing here. So if you got your kidneys here, then you have the peritoneal membrane, and then you have your belly, and this person's got an Audi. You got me? Yeah, well, it'll only be here for a second. So what they will do is they will insert tubes into a person's belly outside. So they insert tubes into the peritoneal cavity. And then they dump dialyzing fluid. And because the peritoneal membrane is selectively permeable, it will allow waste and electrolytes out. And you keep that in for about 8 or 10 hours, and then you dump it into the toilet, and now you have cleaned your blood. That's called peritoneal dialysis. So peritoneal dialysis is usually the choice that people take versus hemodialysis if they are very young and healthy and they're active. Otherwise, hemodialysis requires you to sit by this big frickin' machine for 4 or 6 hours, maybe 2 or 3 times a week, depending, and you can't do much else but sit there and not read the textbook. So this is another alternative to hemodialysis, and it's usually reserved for younger people who are more active and they don't have comorbidity. 6:32, I'm bringing you comorbidity. Tell me you got that. Okay. All right. And you went over this in general, so I'm going to be very quick, right? I'm going to give you a brief overview of the urinary system as a whole. This is important, really important. The blood that's actually filtered by the kidney is arterial blood. And the reason arterial blood is filtered is because it's under pressure. So it is that pressure of the blood in the renal artery that will ultimately cause the filtration of that blood and the filtering of the plasma to form urine. You got me? So the urine is formed in the kidney, and then it is drained from the kidney through 2 hollow muscular tubes called ureters or ureters, right? And these are hollow muscular tubes, so the urine just doesn't slide down it like a slide at, the water park. It's peristaltic waves that will move that urine, and you want that because if you stand on your head, the urine could back up into the kidney if it was just a hollow tube. So it will move peristaltically. That's why when people develop kidney stones, they get what's called renal colic. So as that stone tries to pass and the ureter is contracting, it's producing waves of pain. That's why they get these shooting pain from that renal colic, and it's the contraction of the ureter. And most kidney stones are a combination of calcium and urate, calcium and oxalate, or calcium and citrate. That's why they want you to catch the stone so they can analyze it, because sometimes diet changes can actually reduce your risk for the formation of kidney stones. And we're not there yet, but just, thinking clinically. anytime someone has a kidney stone, you always check their parathyroid gland. Always. You'll always draw a parathyroid hormone level, because high levels of parathyroid hormone in the blood make more calcium in the blood. And the more calcium you have in your blood, the more calcium will end up in your urine, and the more likely it will combine to form a kidney stone. Yeah? Okay, then the ureters, and this is important too, and again, another fine example of the body doing stuff that makes sense. The ureters don't connect to the top of the bladder. They actually connect to the lower portion of the bladder, here. So the openings to the ureters are actually underneath the bladder, and the urine kind of bubbles up. And there's actually little sphincters in there too that prevent the reflux of urine back into the ureters. You don't want that. And we haven't covered digestion yet, but anyways, you have an internal sphincter, little band of muscle, and then you have an external sphincter. The internal sphincter is under autonomic control. So as you fill up your bladder, notice that it's yellow. And as the bladder fills up, the pressure is going to start to build up. And when that pressure hits a critical value, bless you, it's going to initiate the micturition reflex, and it's going to cause that internal sphincter to relax. But you have an external sphincter that's under conscious control. And you say, hey, I'm not going to piddle in class. I'm going to wait till break. And you tighten that sphincter up so you don't pee your pants. Now, women who have had babies, little Egbert, he's resting on the bladder. And
why is it harder to not get yourself?
Because the baby, the uterus is actually retroverted. It's like inverted, and it sits on the top of the bladder. So as the baby fills up, because it's getting bigger, it will begin to compress the bladder, and then women get what's called stress incontinence. So if they're pregnant and they sneeze, right, the abdominal pressure increases. Now Egbert's pushing on there, and boom, you piddle your pants. What's that? And what will happen is that muscle will actually become weak, and women will get stress incontinence as they get older. And you know about the primitive reflex? If you hear water running or you feel water, it makes you pee, right? So it's called the primitive reflex. So back in the day, they didn't have bottled water, so Ugg would have to go and look for food and look for a source of water. So they didn't want to pee until they heard water or felt water, because there's water in your bladder. And as your blood volume decreased, you could actually reabsorb some of the water from your bladder back into your bloodstream. But once you heard it or felt it, you could pee because you had a water supply. That's true. I'm not making that up. Tell me, like you go into the bathroom, check your look, you know, I still look good. Then you wash your hands, and I'm like, oh, now I got to pee. Then, like tonight, you want to get out of class, right? And you're like, I'm not peeing. I'm going to try and make it home, right? So then you drive home. Then you hit a bump. You're like, ooh, hang on. Then you get about a block and a half away from the house, and you're like, oh, my God, you ain't going to make it, right? And then you fumble with your key. For a guy, man, I just go in the bush. Women, it's tough. Like, what do you do on a boat? That's really what you got to do, right? I know. Did I ever tell you I had a buddy who could pee over a van? 1986, he peed over a van at County Stadium. We met 2 girls that way.
I just find it amazing that those are the kinds of exercises too. You have to practice and nobody can do that. That's a lot of pressure.
I know, it was really impressive.
Yeah, a lot of pressure. Literally.
Yeah. Do you remember Bugs Bunny cartoons? Do you remember the Martian? Doesn't he kind of look like the Martian? This right here?
Can I ask before those urinal openings, are they from the back?
Yeah, they kind of, because that's wrong. Look in your book. It'll show it coming underneath, and that makes sense. You don't want it coming from the top because if there were no valves on there, that urine would back up if you stood on your head. You don't want that. Body doing stuff that makes sense. All right? So that's really all I wanted to say about that. All right? And then we have Kenny from South Park. There you go. Okay, I always got to show that. People never ask about why I have this.
Why do you have that?
I'm not going to tell you.
Where receptors are on the
Because you have
Yeah.
internal figure, right?
What happens is you have smooth muscle. It contracts differently than skeletal or cardiac muscle. Watch. You don't want your arteries going like this. Contract, relax, because you'd be up and down, right? Because your blood up and down. So you want to maintain that tone. So when smooth muscle contracts, there's a protein called calmodulin that interacts with myosin, and it produces a prolonged contraction. So in smooth muscle, especially the muscle of the bladder and in the stomach as well as the gallbladder, it has this ratcheting mechanism. So as the pressure builds up and you haven't voided your bladder, it will ratchet down to relieve the pressure. And then you build up more urine, pressure builds up, you ain't going to go, and you ratchet down again. Well,
you really have to pee like for a long time and then it goes away.
Right.
The sensation decreases.
Yes.
Like you feel like you're going to pee on your own, then
it goes away because the bladder ratchets down. But then you reach a point where it can't ratchet no more, and if you don't pee, you're going to pee on yourself. The problem is that the micturition reflex, that reflexive circle gets stronger. That's why after you break the seal, then every 2 seconds you got to pee again because that micturition reflex is so much stronger. That's why that happens. In women, man, they can hold it forever. Me, man, I got to go. Right? You just do. And let me tell you something. When you got to pee or take a dump, nothing else in the world matters. Right? Nothing matters. Right? You lost $1 million in the stock. I don't care. I got to go. Worry about that after I go. That's Maslow's hierarchy of needs, man. Coming right at you. Okay, so what I'm going to do now, I'm going to give you a look inside the kidney, a cross-section of the kidney, and show you some stuff. Now, watch. In any organ, where you have major structures entering or exiting that organ, that's referred to as the hilum of the organ. So the hilum of the kidney is right here. Renal artery, renal vein, ureter, entering or exiting the kidney. And again, it's the arterial blood that's filtered by the kidney. So you have the renal artery that comes off, and as you can see, as it enters the hilum, it begins to break into smaller and smaller arteries. You got me? And the kidney is actually divided into 2 main portions, but 3, I like to look at it. So going from outside to in, you have the outer portion called the cortex. And the outer portion of any organ is the cortex. So in this case, it's the cortex of the kidney. And in most cases, and in this class, it's all cases, that is where the nephron begins, the functional unit of the kidney. All right? Now, as you can see, when you move from the cortex inward, you're looking at the medulla. And the medulla of the kidney is divided into these things called renal pyramids. And the renal pyramids house the collecting tubules of the nephron. What's most important, at least in this little thing right here, is all the urine that's formed by individual nephrons collects in what's called the calyx of the kidney. Calyx means cup, right? So you have cup of urine, cup of soup. So this is the urine's commons area. And this is where the urine meets to talk about their day, Anna. And they say, hey, how you doing? Well, I'm a little pissed off. Every semester, and it's just the same reaction. It's very disappointing. Now, watch. I'm just going to say this. Where you form kidney stones is in the calyx of the kidney, the cup. Now, look, those kidney stones are not like Piri boulders. They're like ninja Death Stars. They're sharp and they're jagged. And they typically don't give you any problems when they're in the calyx. But if you look, the ureter begins to narrow. And when that stone tries to pass and the little sharp, jagged ends dig into the lining of the ureter, that's when you get pain. Tell me you got that. Now,
How do you feel the pain when it's in there? Like when it's in the ureter? Because I know by the time they make it to the emergency room, they usually peed one out, and that hurts too. But like, where is the pain? Where will they describe the pain?
It's in the back, and it radiates, and it's referred to as it's like a shooting, stabbing pain. Sometimes it'll be in the epigastric area because guts are innervated very diffusely, so pain can be referred. But it is usually flank pain, or sometimes it can be epigastric pain. Yeah, you are. Yep. So what they tell you to do is they tell you to drink beer. And the reason they tell you to drink beer is beer inhibits the antidiuretic hormone, and it causes more urine to be formed. And these are hollow muscular tubes. So what they will do is they will stretch those ureters and allow that kidney stone to pass. So yes, it does. But you have a larger volume, so it's less likely that stone is going to irritate the other side or get blocked. So I drink beer prophylactically to prevent kidney stones. No kidney stones on me.
Those are very tiny openings.
Those ureters?
So do they ever like them open when they go through?
They can damage them, and it can cause them to bleed. But if you got a big freaking kidney stone that's going to tear it open, that thing's a monster. Yeah, you're going to be in pain. They will. They'll actually hang out and kind of just bounce around. But when they start to... Yeah, you can. And when they start to pass, that's the problem. I got this little old lady. She finally retired. She's 86 years old. And she goes, I got kidney stones. And they showed me the x-ray. And sure enough, you could see the kidney stones because they're solid. So the x-rays, they show them up. And I go, as long as they're not passing, don't worry about it. And she goes, yeah, that's what the doctor said. But I told you about this guy that he was working in the shop. Did I tell you about this guy? He comes in and he goes, Tim, I got this really bad back pain. I go, well, how long have you had it? He goes, it just started. I go, you got a fever? He goes, yeah, I feel hot and I'm sweating. And I go, I think you have a kidney stone. I said, drink a bunch of water. And if you can't work, then you're going to have to go to the emergency room and see what they can give you some pain medicine at least. So anyways, I'm doing stuff in the office, and he works in manufacturing. So he comes to me, right? Tim, I got to talk to you. I go, what? I passed my kidney stone, and he shows it to me. It looked like a freaking Tic Tac. It was huge. It was yellow and brown and all jaggedy. And I go, you passed that?
I have had somebody show me who actually kept it in a box. It was like a small pine cone.
Right. I go, dude, how did you do that? How did you do that? I'm like, I can't imagine that. I said, I hurt for you. It really depends. If it's not passing and they're a lot of pain, or because it digs inside and it causes an infection and bleeding, they'll go in and get it. What they'll do is they do what's called extracorporeal sound wave lithotripsy. Right. Or they have to go in and surgically remove it. But the most common course is to try to let it pass on its own. Yeah, they have to first rule out why you're having pain. Once they know it's a kidney stone, then they'll give you some pain medicine, right? But I told you about the fighter pilot in Vietnam getting shot down. I told you about this? Yeah, I did. He came in crawling into the ER crying, begging for morphine. Yeah. And they found out he had a kidney stone, and he said, Tim, they pull out our fingernails, all kinds of stuff. And he goes, that I would put up with that before I would the guy was crying, right? And he was begging for morphine. I'm like, I'm updating my Facebook status, dude. I ain't got time for that. Yeah. Tell me you got that. Okay, now, look, here's some math for you. Yeah, I know, right? Everybody just turn off right now. How much blood do we pump each minute? Oh, don't you wish that was the final question? Yeah. If that was every NCLEX question, you guys would be killing it. That's 5,000 cc's per minute. And on average, about 20% of your blood flow goes through both kidneys each minute. And that means about 1,000 cc's goes through your kidneys, filters through your kidneys each minute. So that means 60,000 cc's per hour and 1.44 million cc's per day. Do you pee 1,440,000 cc's of urine per day? No. Right. You would get nothing done. Right? You could fill up a Mr. Turdy pool. Hop in, kids. 98.6. You got me? So what you need to understand is the kidneys filter plasma, but the vast majority of it gets reabsorbed. So to make urine, and I'll be more specific in a minute, number one, the plasma of the blood is filtered. The formed elements of the blood should never be found in urine. Red blood cells, white blood cells, and the big frickin' protein albumin should never be in your urine. If you got that in your urine, something's wrong with you. So the only thing that's filtered is the plasma of the blood. So what's in the plasma of the blood? Good. You don't pee dust most days. Water. And then you have electrolytes, right? You have amino acids. You actually have small proteins, right? You got urea, ammonia, and creatinine, right? You got glucose. No, this is the stuff that's in the plasma. Okay, so this is the plasma, right? You got vitamins. Yeah? You got clotting factors. All of these things are in the plasma. So to make urine, you first have to filter all of the plasma. So the kidney works kind of like you clean a closet. When you clean your closet, you take everything out of your closet, and then you decide what you want to put back. So once the blood plasma is filtered, so you filter the blood plasma, and you filter all of it. Once you filter the blood plasma, you decide what you're going to put back. Now, this is important, and these terms are important. When you eat something, and it gets broken down by your digestive tract, and then those nutrients get absorbed into the blood, that's called absorption. It's now in the blood. When you filter the blood plasma, it goes out of the blood. And then what you do is you selectively bring the stuff back into the blood. That's called reabsorption. So reabsorption occurs in the kidney. Say yes. Now, so if you look at blood plasma and the stuff in it, what is ultimately urine is a combination of three things that occur in the kidney, and specifically the nephron. Number one is filtration. It's the filtration of plasma. Once that plasma is filtered, your next step is to reabsorb what the body needs. So the stuff that was filtered is called, oddly enough, filtrate. Now, some things that are in the blood, they cannot be filtered by the nephron. They can't be filtered by the kidney. So they have to be actively secreted from the blood into the urine. So the other step in urine formation is secretion. So the nephron does three things to make urine. You filter the plasma. When what's filtered then gets selectively reabsorbed back into the blood. And some stuff can't be filtered, so it has to be actively secreted. Now this is very important. Secretion by the kidney requires ATP. So the first thing that goes when your kidneys are failing is the secretion portion. That goes first. And you're not going to believe this. Watch. There's three big things that have to be actively secreted from the blood into the urine. And they are and creatinine. So people who are in renal failure, they develop a metabolic acidosis and hyperkalemia. So if you're dealing with people who are in renal failure, you have to monitor their potassium level and you have to monitor their pH, because those things have to be secreted. They can't be filtered. Ready? All right. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to take you and I gave you the little handout of the nephron, and we're going to go through this. And this is where the rubber meets the road, ladies and gentlemen. So as you can see, the renal artery, once it gets into the hilum of the kidney, it branches off into smaller and smaller arteries, right? The renal artery then branches into this small artery. Where is it? You got me? And that's right, that artery that enters the beginning of the nephron is called the afferent arteriole. So the afferent arteriole takes arterial blood that's under pressure towards the first part of the nephron. This, ladies and gentlemen, right here is a nephron. And each kidney has anywhere from 1 to 1.5 million of these guys. So this is where the plasma of the blood is filtered. When 80% of your nephrons are shot in both kidneys, you cannot adequately filter your blood, and you will require dialysis. So you can jack up your kidneys pretty good and still do okay for a while. All right? Now, watch. This blood from the afferent arteriole is bringing it to this ball of capillaries called the glomerulus. The glomerulus is like the spaghetti strainer, right? It catches the big stuff in the blood, and it lets the little stuff go through. So you make spaghetti, you cook it, right? And then you put a spaghetti strainer in the sink, and you dump everything from the pan in there. The strainer catches the spaghetti and lets the little stuff go into the sink. Say yes. So this ball of capillaries is actually more porous than normal capillaries. There's actual slits in there called fenestrations that allow more stuff to be pushed out of that glomerulus than normal. You're with me? So if we take this picture right here and we blow it up, right? And I'll show you a simplified version of it. There you go. Now watch. Here's the afferent arteriole. And it's taking that blood into this ball of capillaries called the glomerulus. And it's under pressure. You got me? And that pressure, that capillary fluid pressure within the glomerulus, is going to force water and the small stuff that's in the plasma out of the blood. So, and we already kind of covered the small stuff that's in there. So there's water and stuff. So there is a cap that goes right around this ball of capillaries called Bowman's capsule or the glomerular capsule. So think of the glomerular capsule as the sink and the glomerulus as a spaghetti strainer. So you filtered the spaghetti and the water and the salt or whatever, oregano, whatever you put in there, whatever. That gets filtered into the sink. And what's left over then leaves the glomerulus and exits it through the efferent arteriole. Yes? No, the little stuff, because the little stuff got filtered out. So the big stuff that remains is, we know this, what's the big stuff in the blood that should remain? Right. Red blood cells, white blood cells, and albumin. And the reason they don't get filtered is by virtue of their size. So if you have blood in your urine, you have pus in your urine, or you have egg white in your urine, something's wrong with your kidneys. Yeah. That's why if you work in a doctor's office, they'll say, pee in this cuppeth, and then they pee in the cuppeth, and then you dip it. And one of the things you look for are white blood cells, red blood cells, and protein, albumin. Tell me you got that. Small proteins are always dumped into the urine, small proteins called microalbumin. You've heard of this? So that's normal. But once you get a greater than normal amount of microalbumin, that is a sign that your kidneys are beginning to fail. The little capillary, the little spaghetti strainer, the holes are getting bigger. So that means your kidneys are getting jacked up. Say yes, you follow this. All right, so now this is important. What's left over leaves the glomerulus through the efferent arteriole. And the efferent arteriole then forms a network of capillaries that surround the yellow brick road. Did you have a question?
Yes. If you remove all the plasma from the blood, how is it going to do that?
What's that?
If you just remove all the plasma...
You don't.
Okay.
You only remove about 20%. Right. That's all that goes through it. So 20% of the plasma. You got me?
Yep.
Okay, so the big stuff goes through the efferent arteriole.
Right. So the red blood cells, white blood cells, albumin leave the glomerulus, remain in the blood, and then the efferent arteriole then forms a network of capillaries that parallel the collecting tubules, the yellow brick road. So this yellow brick road, follow it. Nothing? God.
I got it.
Did you get it?
Oh, yeah.
See, follow the yellow brick road. Okay. This yellow brick road collectively is called the collecting tubules. So the collecting tubules catch the filtered plasma. Are you with me? Yeah. And as the filtered plasma that's in the collecting tubules matriculates through the collecting tubules, 703 bringing you matriculate, in each part of the collecting tubules, specific stuff is brought back into the blood. So very generic here just for a second. Here's stuff that's in the collecting tubules. You got me? And as it moves through the collecting tubules, that stuff is brought back into the blood. That's the phase of reabsorption. The sodium and the glucose and the amino acids that were filtered by the spaghetti strainer, the glomerulus, as it moves through the collecting tubules, it gets reabsorbed back into the blood. And each specific section of the collecting tubules has a particular function. And with this in mind, knowing the specific functions, real smart people with the tape and pocket protectors can develop medications that can either enhance the uptake or inhibit the uptake of certain things that are in the yellow brick road. So this is how diuretics work. Lasix, and there's all the different diuretics. And I put a really nice video out there on the different diuretics and how they affect the nephron. And I did that on my own time, Anna. So you can put that in your pipe and smoke it, sister. That doesn't even make any sense. Are you with me? So, as this stuff is moving through the yellow brick road, right, stuff is going to get reabsorbed back into the blood. But if you recall, some things can't be filtered, so they have to be secreted. So the stuff that remains in the blood that can't be filtered, like potassium and hydrogen ions and creatinine, they have to be actively pumped into the collecting tubules so that they get into the urine. Are you with me? Okay. Now, drugs are also excreted in the kidney. So if your kidneys are failing, drug toxicity happens much quicker. That's why if you're put on a new drug, you know what doctors will do? They will do a blood urea nitrogen and creatinine level to determine that your kidneys are functioning properly so that you don't have to worry about toxicity. Say yes-icity. Okay. Yeah. Say that one more time.
The stuff that can't be filtered,
Yes.
it's sent back to the collecting.
No. The stuff that can't be filtered remains in the blood, so it exits the glomerulus and remains in the blood. And those things have to be actively secreted from the blood into the collecting tubules so that you can get rid of them. You got me? And this is important because, remember, when the kidneys begin to fail, the secretion of stuff begins to fail first. So the ability to get rid of potassium and hydrogen, creatinine, that begins to fail first. Are you with me? All right. Now, watch. Everything that we've learned up until this point will now come back and bite you right on the left clavichord. Son of a... I don't know. Bicarbonate? Bicarbonate is readily filtered, and I'll show you. Okay, what the hell is this? Okay.
You sure you can get this stuff now?
Huh. Yeah, I don't know. Okay, ready? Huh? I got some kidneys I can show you, pig kidneys. They're about our size. Yeah, they're about, they're about the size of your hand. Yeah.
What? For real?
Yeah. Yeah.
I noticed that it shuts off when you start releasing a whole bunch of stuff. It kind of freaks out. So that's why you're shutting down. It's when you're releasing.
Oh, then I'll just keep writing over stuff.
Yeah, you should.
Okay, I think you're right. Okay, ready? Ready? What is osmolarity? Oh, God. That's very good. Solute over solvent, stuff over water. You got me? Okay, watch. The osmolarity of the blood is 300 milliosmoles. All you need to know is that it's 300. That's all you need to know. 300 milliosmoles. The osmolarity of the blood.
How do you write that down?
Milliosmoles? I always screw that up. Milli osmoles. That ain't right. Milliosmol. I don't know. I can't remember. Just like that milli equivalent, so I screw that up. Oh. How is it again? Wait, let me write it down. I'm slow. Little m, big O, little s, little m. Oh, yeah, that's it. Milliosmoles. Forget that stuff. Just so you know, if you don't write milliosmoles correctly, I'm marking it wrong. That is so harsh. Okay, so watch. And what gets filtered in the glomerulus into Bowman's capsule? What's actually moved out of the blood? The plasma of the blood. So when the plasma of the blood is filtered by the glomerulus, its osmolarity remains 300. You got me? Now, the first part of the collecting tubules, as you can see, it's twisted. And when you have twisted thoughts, Anna, those are called convoluted thoughts. And because it's closer to the origination of the nephron, these tubules being twisted are called the proximal convoluted tubules, right? They're closer to the point of origination or attachment. You're going to learn this. Shoulder. Yeah. That my arm's attached at the shoulder. So watch. My elbow is proximal to my wrist because my elbow is closer to the point of attachment. So where does the origination of the glomerulus begin? At the glomerulus. So the tubes that are twisted because they're closer to the glomerulus, they're called the proximal convoluted tubules. All right? Okay. Now, one of the unique things of the kidney, and it's only found in the kidney, is the kidney interstitium, the interstitial spaces. The osmolarity varies as you move from the cortex to the medulla of the kidney. Now, this is important. So, if you look, I'm going to erase slowly. When you first start out, the osmolarity is 300. So, you could literally draw a line across the cortex and the medulla of the kidney, and you can actually see it. Well, not see it, but you can actually measure it. So, if you look, again, as you move deeper into the medulla of the kidney, the osmolarity begins to go up. And when you get into the cortex of the kidney, the medulla of the kidney, is very, very high. And it goes like this. In the cortex, it starts out at 300. And then as you move deeper into the medulla of the kidney, it goes to 600. And then it goes to 900. And then when you get into the deep portion of the medulla, the osmolarity is 1200. So as the nephron tubules move from the cortex into the medulla, the osmolarity of that environment that those tubules are seeing is saltier and saltier. So it is sodium and chloride along with urea that maintain that high osmolarity within the medulla of the kidney. Now, because the filtrate is separate from the blood and the interstitial space, that changing osmolarity is going to affect the filtrate. Are you with me? Yes or no? I'm recording this, and my voice sounds like James Earl Jones tonight because I'm sick. Ready? Right. So now watch, and this you need this. Look, if you're going to clean your closet, right, and you got your textbook that you're going to put back in there because Lord knows you're never going to read it. You're not going to take your textbook and put it in the garage knowing that you're going to put it back in, right? You're going to leave it right there. So when the plasma is filtered by the glomerulus, the vast majority of reabsorption of the filtrate back into the blood occurs in the proximal convoluted tubules. Why? Because it's right there. It's right there. Right. The vast majority of that reabsorbed filtrate occurs in the proximal convoluted tubules. As a matter of fact, about 70% of what was filtered gets reabsorbed passively and actively back into the blood in the proximal convoluted tubules. And because it's actively reabsorbed, that requires energy. That's why the kidneys are really very highly metabolically active tissue, because it requires a bunch of ATP to pump those ions and stuff back into the blood that got filtered. Say yes. And it's done so, the reabsorption of that filtrate is done so isoosmotically. Oh. Yeah. I'm killing it tonight. I'm sick and bringing you isoosmotic. What that means is that equal amounts of solute and water get reabsorbed. So what was the osmolarity of the filtrate? 300. So when 70% of the stuff gets reabsorbed along with the water, when it hits the end of the proximal convoluted tubules, the osmolarity is still 300. Do you follow that? Now watch. As you can see, this big, fat, convoluted tube begins to thin out and goes deep into the medulla. And then it makes a little turn, and then it comes back up. This is the loop of Don Henley. And this is important. You have the descending limb going deeper into the medulla. Then you have the little turn. And then you have the ascending limb. And then as you can see, the ascending limb gets a little tubby right at the end. Gets a little thick. This is called the thickened portion of the ascending limb. Thickened portion of the ascending limb. So, let's look at this. Okay? Now watch. Watch. This is a little better picture. So you got the filtrate, and it's going down into the descending limb of the loop of Don Henley. What was the osmolarity? 300. And as it's moving down the descending limb, the peritubular capillaries, the osmolarity is going up. So it's 600, 900, 1200. You got me? And as that filtrate moves down into the descending limb, the only thing that can get reabsorbed in the descending limb of the loop of Don Henley is water. And where does water always go? Low osmolarity to high. So the water is going to leave the descending limb from low osmolarity because it's seeing an environment that's getting saltier. The osmolarity is going up. So the water is going to move until the osmolarity of the peritubular capillaries and the osmolarity of the filtrate is equal. Say yes. Then, when you get down to the bottom here, it is really concentrated. Osmolarity is like 1,200. And now you're moving up the ascending limb. And in the ascending limb, the only thing that can be reabsorbed back into the blood are electrolytes, solute, urea, stuff. So as you move, as you reabsorb electrolytes, but no water can be reabsorbed. Water is impermeable in the ascending limb. What's going to happen to the osmolarity of the filtrate? Will it go up or down? It will go down because you're removing stuff. You're bringing that stuff back into the blood. And it's going to move. Watch. It's going to move. So the only thing that can be reabsorbed in the ascending limb is electrolyte, solute. So this is where you absorb your sodium, your potassium, your chloride, your calcium. I could go on, but I just don't have time. And your urea. You got me? And the osmolarity is going to drop until it gets back to the osmolarity of 300. Now wait, this is the important piece. Now, this filtrate is going to enter the thickened portion of the ascending limb. And in the thickened portion of the ascending limb, electrolytes are actively pumped back into the blood. So if we look, you got the blood. I'm going to try and do this. And then you got the, yeah, that ain't bad. This is the thickened portion of the ascending limb. And watch. Yeah, so the cells that make up the thickened portion of the ascending limb, they have little, what are called symporters. Yes. And you don't even have to worry about that. This is what I want you to understand. In the thickened portion of the ascending limb, sodium, potassium, and 2 chlorides have to be reabsorbed into the blood, back into the blood together. Why is it 2 chlorides? That's very good. That's to maintain the law of electroneutrality. Now watch. And when you reabsorb the sodium, what's going to follow by osmosis? Water. So when sodium, potassium, and chloride are reabsorbed back into the blood, that's going to reabsorb water as well. You with me? Yeah. So there's a drug called Lasix that prevents chloride from being reabsorbed back into the blood in the thickened portion of the ascending limb of the loop of Don Henley. If you have congestive heart failure, do you want your blood volume increasing? No. So you give them a drug called Lasix, and that will prevent chloride from being reabsorbed. And I told you, and I'll never forget it, it was 7/21. Never forget it. That if you don't reabsorb all 3 of these electrolytes, none of these electrolytes are reabsorbed. So if you don't reabsorb chloride, you don't reabsorb potassium, and you don't reabsorb sodium, and then you don't reabsorb water. So what happens to the amount of water that you pee out? It goes up because you're not reabsorbing it back into the blood. And because this portion of the thickened portion of the ascending limb is where you can reabsorb a ton of water, when you inhibit that process, you lose a ton of water. That's why Lasix is a powerful diuretic. And because it affects the thickened portion of the ascending limb, it's called a loop diuretic. And watch, because you lose potassium too, you got to chase people's potassium all the time because the potassium level's dropping when you give them Lasix. And that's why. You like that, huh?
By the time that water gets to that thickened portion, isn't there like very little left because it wasn't just reabsorbed on the other side? Or left on the other side?
You have about 20%, 20 to 25% of the water that remains gets reabsorbed with this Symporter. So you're losing 25% of the water. A lot of that water gets is not reabsorbed yet. A lot of the electrolytes and stuff are, but not all the water. This is powerful because this is actively pumping those electrolytes back in. That's how Lasix works as a powerful diuretic. You got me? So the Lupodon Henle is where you reabsorb a lot of water back into the blood, and especially the thickened portion of the ascending limb. And because if you don't reabsorb the chloride, you don't reabsorb the sodium and potassium. That's why Lasix is a non-potassium sparing diuretic. It gets rid of potassium. Yes? That's why they have to take potassium supplements with Lasix. Now, let's get back here. Now you got the next section of the collecting tubules. And as you can see, it's twisted, so it's convoluted. And it's farther away from the origination of the glomerulus, so it's called the distal convoluted tubules. Now in the distal convoluted tubules, this is where you get rid of a lot of drugs. So how many people think they are right now getting rid of drugs in their distal convoluted tubules? Anybody? No? Any heroin or cocaine or crack? Okay. So, oh, right, you're right. So this is where you get rid of drugs. This is also where you get rid of uric acid. Now, Timmy's going to show you something. Right? No one will explain this to you. Just me. And the reason no one will explain it to you is because I'm the only one in the world that knows this. And now that I'm going to explain it to you, we're going to be in a select group. So when I see you, maybe at Woodman's, or maybe, I don't know, at the Chunky Monkey. Yeah. We won't even talk. We'll just look at each other and go. Now watch. There's a drug called hydrochlorothiazide. Hydrochlorothiazide. I'm just talking here. You can take this for what it's worth. Hydrochlorothiazide is a weak diuretic. And it prevents the reabsorption of sodium in the distal convoluted tubules. As Kristen mentioned, and it was a very good point, well, gee whiz, Tim, didn't you absorb a lot of the water back into the blood? Very good point. So what makes it a weak diuretic is only about 5% of the water that remains in the collecting tubules gets reabsorbed back into the blood in the distal convoluted tubules. So a drug that affects reabsorption of sodium farther down the line will have a less powerful effect. So hydrochlorothiazide is a weak diuretic. Here's the important piece. To get rid of hydrochlorothiazide, it competes for the same place that you excrete uric acid. So if you're on hydrochlorothiazide, you're not going to get rid of as much uric acid. And uric acid will start building up in your blood, and it will crystallize and form gout. That's why hydrochlorothiazide, one of the risks of taking it is the formation of gout. That's top flight information right there, ladies and gentlemen. Yes. Tell me you got that. Correct. So uric acid starts building up. That's why the doctor will say, hey, you got your toes sore or your toes sore if you're, see? Now you can use that. See some patients, they're on hydrochlorothiazide. Hey, you got gout, buddy? And then they'll say, yeah, well, you just say hard cheese. Could be worse, could be me. All right? Now, in the distal convoluted tubules, this is where hormones take effect. Yes, and there are 3 distal convoluted tubules. 3 hormones have a powerful effect on the distal convoluted tubules. They are A and P. No one's got this right yet, so I'm going to try it. A and P stands for atrial natriuretic peptide. Yes, atrial natriuretic peptide. What does natriuretic mean? You guys you answered it the same way. Every class has answered it the same way. Now I'm going to write it a different way, and you're going to get it. And if you don't, I'm going to mark your whole life wrong. Natriuretic. What does diuretic mean? To get rid of water. Dia means running through. The water runs through you. Diarrhea, right? Crap running through you. So sodium runs through you. So if you don't reabsorb sodium, what don't you reabsorb along with it? Water. So I'm spitballing here. If you get this, I'm going to be proud of you. What does atrial natriuretic peptide, this hormone, do to your blood pressure? It lowers it. That was good. That's high-level thinking, people. Well, 2 of you. So this is the only hormone in the body that actually lowers your blood pressure. All other hormones raise it. And it lowers it by getting rid of sodium. And when I'm ready, I'm going to explain to you why it's released. Why do you think it'd be released? I'm spitballing here again. Your blood pressure's high. Cut it out. Another hormone is ADH, antidiuretic hormone. What's the medical term for antidiuretic hormone? Swig off my Diet Mountain Dew and this clippy thing you can pinch people with. To get it right. Sadaka? Dan Stampede, Gateway Technical College. What's the medical term for ADH? Here, give a pincher with this. It's called vasopressin. Have you ever heard of vasopressin? Never. That was a look. Like, how are we supposed to know that, Tim? Am I right? Well, yeah, right. ADH is called vasopressin. 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 What do you think ADH does to your blood pressure? Vasopressin. Makes it go up, right? So vasopressin deals with pure water. It doesn't deal with any electrolytes. It deals purely with water. It retains water. You got me? And then the final, excuse me, the final hormone is aldosterone. And aldosterone, right? Watch. What does aldosterone do? Oh, look at you. You go, girl. Okay, watch. Watch. This is the distal convoluted tubule. Yeah? And here's the blood, the peritubular capillaries. Are you with me? So this is the distal convoluted tubule, and this is the peritubular capillary. Embedded in the cells that make up the distal convoluted tubules, this cell's kind of jacked up, but that's okay. You have a pump. And this pump pumps sodium and potassium. So, what's the name of the pump? So watch, but this is important. It takes 2 potassiums from the blood and pumps them into what's soon going to be urine. And it takes 3 sodiums from what was going to be urine and pumps them back into the blood. And when you pump sodium into the blood, what's going to follow it back into the blood as well? Water. So if the sodium-potassium pump is activated in the distal convoluted tubules, what will happen to your blood volume? Go up. What will happen to venous return? What will happen to stretch? Can't even do it anymore. So the hormone that stimulates the sodium-potassium pump in the distal convoluted tubules is called aldosterone. Now this is very important. Know this, and I'm going to say it just once really fast in Spanish. Watch. The only way to get potassium out of your blood is to pump it out of your blood. And what's the only thing that pumps potassium out of your blood? So if you recall, someone with Addison's disease, Timmy's relating, they don't produce cortisol, DHEA, and so are they able to get potassium out of their blood? So one of the electrolyte abnormalities that people with Addison, they have hyperkalemia. And watch. I'm going to die here. Watch. If you don't have aldosterone, you're not going to be able to pump sodium back in. So what's going to happen to your sodium level? It's going to drop. And what's going to happen to the amount of urine you produce? You think. This is urine. Urine. This is what's going to be urine. It's going to increase, right? So these people develop polyuria, and they develop low sodium and high levels of potassium. Tell me you got that. Do you see how beautiful that is? There you go. And no one can argue with this. No one can argue with this. If you understand what causes a problem and what those things do if you have that problem, you'll know the signs and symptoms of no one can argue with that. That's why the devil's in the details, ladies and gentlemen. If you understand this, you're going to be straight. And let me tell you something. You're now beginning to find out the importance of the sodium-potassium pump. So if you ever forget that, no swig off the Diet Mountain Dew. And one student was going to get this necklace, too. Where the hell did this come from? Yeah, probably worth $1 gazillion. Tell me you followed that. So those are the three hormones. Can you do me a favor, help a brother out here? Can you look at the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone video? Yeah. Would you do that for me? And then would you also look at the diuretic video? Just look at it. And there's also another one on the basic structure and function of the nephron, specifically about that. That gives you kind of an overview, but what I went over tonight, we did a good job.
Tell me again what PTC stands for.
I'm down with PTC. That's the peritubular capillaries. right? So you're looking at this. You're looking at, wow, this is a lot. Okay. Now I'm going to do it real slow. So, right, and watch. The reason that the blood goes from red to blue is that these tubular cells require a lot of oxygen because they need a lot of ATP because the sodium-potassium pump is like a madman in there. So when people go into shock, they will become hypoxic in their kidneys, and that will cause acute kidney injury. It will actually cause acute renal failure. That's why maintaining blood flow and oxygenation to the kidney when somebody's jacked up is critical. Because if you can maintain kidney function, these people have a fighting chance. If you live long enough.
So you want us to describe the basic structure of the nephron, you want us to go through the afferent, the glomerulus.
Yes, and you're going to tell me about the osmolarity increasing, and you're going to tell me at each part of the nephron what's reabsorbed or secreted. Yeah. And then you're going to tell me the 3 hormones that affect the distal convoluted tubules.
And are we ending with the distal convoluted tubules?
No.
But in the question, it's only 2.
Right, because then I'm going to, in the other question, I'm asking you to explain the renin-angiotensin-aldosterone mechanism.
Right there, okay.
Right? Okay, watch. That's a good point. Now watch. Once you have gotten through the distal convoluted tubules, what's left of that filtrate is going to end up in the collecting ducts. And in the absence of hormones, the collecting ducts are impermeable to water. So whatever remains in the collecting ducts is your urine. Now, this is important, and let me show you. The kidneys are really badasses, man. I'm not even playing. If I could be an organ, I'd be a kidney. You know, because you could walk around and like, look, I'm a badass. I know it. Right? I'll cut you. Yeah, that's the tattoo. I'll talk about that later. Now watch. This guy right here is the collecting duct. And then it drains the urine into the little urine commons area. Talk about their day, and then they head down the slide to the bladder, and you pee it into the toilet or wherever. This is, right, there's the glomerulus, proximal, loop of Don-Henle, distal, collecting ducts, urine. Yeah, it's a loop of Henle, not Don-Henle. Now watch. What's that? Yeah. I had a girl, she sat right there 3 years ago. And it's like 9:30, and I'm like, come on, I got to kind of cut you off. Tim, I don't know. I've been sitting here, I can't remember that guy's first name. And I go, what? You know, the Lupa Henley. I go, I made that up. And she sat there.
You got the important part. Lupa Henley.
Who? Right, now watch. This is what I want you to understand. In the absence of hormones, in the absence of hormones, the collecting ducts are impermeable to water. The only hormone that affects the collecting ducts is ADH. And what ADH does is that it actually stimulates the cells of the collecting ducts to do this. It will actually insert water channels into the cells of the collecting ducts, and it will allow the water to get reabsorbed back into the blood. Now watch, and I'll explain this as we get there. The farther down these aquaporins, these little water channels are inserted, because the osmolarity increases, more of the water gets reabsorbed. So with maximum ADH secretion, you produce no urine output. You don't produce any urine output.
With increased ADH, no maximum.
There, maximum ADH secretion, there is no urine output. And I'm just going to tell you this, and I'll explain it on Monday. But ADH is secreted as a result of increases in osmolarity. You got me? So I'm going to show you, did I ever show you the movie Unforgiven?
I don't know, but before you do that,
Oh, that's too late. I'm canceling.
that they insert these
Watch. Yeah, ADH will actually bind to ADH receptors on the cells of the collecting ducts. It will then activate this little mechanism called cyclic AMP, and that will activate DNA that will actually build water channels and insert them into the cell membrane. Well, they're actually already built. They just move them into the cell membrane. If you look in your book, it actually does a really nice explanation of it, and there's a really nice picture of it, too. I read that book one time. You guys are, I think you're allergic to books. Are you? Who's allergic to a book? Yeah, like romance novels or killers. I know it's hard. You know, I know it is, reading that stuff. But that's why you got to do it a little bit at a time. It's like hanging out with me. You can only take little chunks of me. All right, then you want to vomit bile.